What if the reason you haven't found financial success has nothing to do with your salary and everything to do with habits the Bible warned you about 3,000 years ago? Right now, while you're watching this, your money is leaking through holes you can't even see. The Bible knew exactly where those holes are. Do you? Here's the brutal truth about money. Your financial struggles aren't because you don't earn enough. They're because you're violating biblical financial principles every single day. I know you don't want to hear that. You'd rather blame your salary, the economy, your boss, or your circumstances. But here's what's really happening. The Bible doesn't just teach us how to get money. It warns us about specific toxic habits that guarantee you'll stay broke, no matter how much you make. And these aren't obvious things like gambling or greed. These are everyday financial behaviors that seem completely normal, maybe even smart, but they're quietly destroying any chance you have at building wealth. Think about it. You probably know someone who makes six figures and is still living paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, someone else making half that amount is building wealth, investing, and sleeping peacefully at night. The difference isn't the income. It's the habits. One person practices biblical financial principles. The other violates them daily and wonders why nothing changes. In this video, I'm exposing 10 toxic financial habits that are biblically proven to ruin your financial future. These aren't just financial tips. These are divine warnings that most people ignore until it's too late. Some of these will make you uncomfortable because you'll see yourself in them. Others will shock you because you've been doing them your whole life thinking they were helping. But here's what makes this critical. These habits don't destroy your finances overnight. They work silently, slowly, until one day you're 50, 60, 70 years old with nothing to show for decades of work. Pay close attention. Because habit number 10. It's the financial killer that keeps more people poor than anything else in this list. If you're ready to stop wondering why your finances never change and start understanding what's actually blocking your blessing, then this message is for you. Let's dive in. The first toxic financial habit that's destroying your future is spending before you tithe or give. Let me paint you a picture. You just got paid. Rent is due. The car note needs to be paid. The kids need new shoes. The electric bill is higher than expected. You tell yourself you'll give to God after everything else is handled. But somehow, there's never anything left. Month after month, you plan to tithe next time, when things are less tight. But next time never comes. Malachi 3 verse 8 says, "Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me." But you say, "In what way have we robbed you?" In tithes and offerings. This isn't about God needing your money. It's about priority and trust. When you spend before you give, you're telling God He's last in your financial life. And according to Proverbs 3:9, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the firstfruits of all your increase. Not the leftovers. Not what's convenient. The firstfruits. That means before anything else gets paid, God gets honored first. Here's what most people miss. God doesn't bless your finances because you have enough to give. He gives you enough because you're willing to give first. The wealthy believers I know don't tithe from what's left over. They budget everything else around their giving. Their bills get paid. Their needs get met. But they refuse to put God last in their financial priorities. That's why Malachi 3:10 promises, "Bring all the tithes into the storehouse and try me now in this, if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it." God is literally challenging you to test Him on this one thing. The second toxic habit is living without a written budget. You think you know where your money goes, but you don't. Proverbs 27:23 says, "Be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds." In modern terms, that means track every single dollar. Luke 14:28 asks, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost?" You cannot manage what you don't measure. Without a budget, you're guessing. And guessing is how people stay broke for decades. Here's the reality. People without budgets feel like they never have enough money, but they can't explain where it all went. They make decent money but somehow it vanishes before the month ends. Meanwhile, people who budget know exactly where every dollar is assigned before the month even begins. They're not smarter. They're not making more money. They're just practicing biblical stewardship. They give every dollar a job, and because of that, their money actually accomplishes something instead of disappearing into thin air. The difference between financial chaos and financial peace is often just a written plan. The third toxic habit is using debt as a tool instead of recognizing it as bondage. Proverbs 22:7 couldn't be clearer. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Not partner. Not customer. Servant. Every time you swipe that credit card for something you can't afford, you're volunteering for financial slavery. Every car loan, every credit card balance, every payment plan is a chain around your financial future. The world calls it leverage. The Bible calls it bondage. The fourth toxic financial habit destroying your future is keeping up with people you're not called to impress. You see someone pull up in a new car and suddenly your perfectly functional vehicle feels like an embarrassment. You scroll through social media and everyone's on vacation, wearing designer clothes, living in beautiful homes. So you spend money you don't have to impress people who don't actually care. You finance furniture to fill a living room for guests who'll visit once. You buy clothes you can't afford to look successful at a job that's barely paying your bills. Proverbs 13:7 warns, "There is one who makes himself rich, yet has nothing, and one who makes himself poor, yet has great riches." You know these people. They look wealthy but they're drowning in debt. Their house is impressive but they can't afford to furnish it properly. Their car is luxury but they're 3 months behind on the note. Their closet is full of designer labels and their bank account is full of overdraft fees. 1 Timothy 6:8 says, "Having food and clothing, with these we shall be content." Not impressed. Not envied. Content. The moment you understand that contentment is wealth, comparison loses its power over your wallet. Here's the shift that changes everything. Wealthy people spend money to build assets. Poor people spend money to look rich. One creates a future. The other destroys it. One builds net worth. The other builds an image that nobody's even paying attention to. Stop competing in a race nobody's actually watching. The people you're trying to impress are too busy trying to impress someone else to even notice what you're doing. The fifth toxic habit is believing, "I deserve this." You had a hard week. You worked overtime. You dealt with a difficult boss or demanding customers. You're stressed and tired and you just want something to make you feel better. So you treat yourself with money you didn't budget for. That new gadget. Those shoes. That meal at an expensive restaurant. You tell yourself you earned it. You deserve it. That's not a treat. That's financial self-sabotage disguised as self-care. Proverbs 21:17 says, "He who loves pleasure will be a poor man." Not might be. Will be. Every time you make an emotional purchase, you're trading your future for a temporary feeling. The pleasure lasts for a day, maybe a week. The payment lasts for months. Hebrews 12:16 warns about Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. He gave up everything that mattered for something that satisfied him for 20 minutes. That's exactly what you're doing every time you swipe your card because you deserve it. You're selling your financial future for temporary emotional satisfaction. The financially free don't spend based on how they feel. They spend based on what they planned. The difference between "I deserve this" and "I budgeted for this" is the difference between poverty and prosperity. One is controlled by emotion. The other is controlled by wisdom. Delayed gratification isn't punishment. It's the price of freedom. The sixth toxic habit is hiding money problems from your spouse. You've got a credit card your husband doesn't know about. You're behind on a bill you haven't mentioned to your wife. You're making financial decisions independently and calling it handling it. But you're not handling it. You're hiding it. And what you hide in the dark will eventually destroy what you're building in the light. Proverbs 15:22 says, "Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors they are established." Marriage is supposed to multiply wisdom, not divide it. Ecclesiastes 4:9 tells us, "Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor." But when you hide financial truth, you create division in the very place God intended to bring provision. Financial intimacy is just as important as physical or emotional intimacy. When money secrets exist, trust erodes. And without trust, the blessing God intended for your union gets blocked. The seventh toxic financial habit is saving without investing. You've been taught that saving money is wise, and it is, but only to a point. Saving protects what you have. Investing multiplies it. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25 shows us something critical. The master gave 3 servants money. 2 invested and doubled what they received. 1 buried his in the ground to keep it safe. When the master returned, he praised the 2 who multiplied and condemned the one who merely protected. Think about that. The servant who played it safe, who protected what he had, who took no risks, was called wicked and lazy. Why? Because faith requires action. Because God's kingdom operates on multiplication, not preservation. If you only save, inflation is eating your future. $1 today won't buy what $1 bought 10 years ago. Money sitting in a savings account at 0.01% interest is actually losing value every single year. You think you're being wise. You're actually watching your wealth slowly disappear. Here's what biblically wealthy people understand. God doesn't bless hoarding. He blesses multiplication. The 5 talents became 10. The 2 became 4. But the 1 stayed 1 and was taken away. Your money needs to work while you sleep. That's not greed. That's stewardship. That's taking what God gave you and making it grow. Emergency savings. Absolutely necessary. But if all your money is sitting in savings doing nothing, you're practicing the same habit that got the servant condemned. The 8th toxic habit is working only for money instead of for excellence. Colossians 3:23 says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." When money becomes your only motivation, you stop seeing opportunities. You do the minimum required. You show up for the paycheck, not for the purpose. You cut corners because they're not paying me enough to care. But every time you give less than your best, you're closing doors to your own future. Proverbs 22:29 says, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings." Excellence opens doors money can't buy. When you work with excellence, you don't have to chase opportunities. They chase you. Your reputation becomes more valuable than your resume. Your character creates pathways your credentials never could. The person who does excellent work at a minimum wage job won't stay in that position long. Excellence gets noticed. Mediocrity gets replaced. Here's the principle that changes everything. Work for God's approval and man's money will follow. Work only for money and both will run from you. When you shift your focus from, "What am I getting paid?" to, "What value am I creating?" everything changes. Promotion doesn't come from your boss. It comes from your work ethic. Your next level isn't about asking for more. It's about becoming worth more. The 9th toxic habit is making financial decisions without seeking wisdom. You see an investment opportunity and jump in without counsel. You buy a house without having it inspected. You start a business without consulting anyone who's done it successfully. You finance a car without researching if you can actually afford it long term. You think you're being decisive. You're actually being foolish. And foolishness is expensive. Proverbs 15:22 says it clearly, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." Proverbs 11:14 adds, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Every expensive mistake you've made financially happened because you moved without wisdom. You trusted your gut instead of seeking God and godly counsel. You listened to a smooth-talking salesperson instead of someone who had your best interests at heart. You made emotional decisions and called them faith. Now we come to the 10th toxic financial habit, and this is the one destroying more financial futures than all the others combined. It's waiting for a miracle instead of applying principles. You're praying for God to bless your finances while violating every financial principle He's given you. You want supernatural provision but you won't practice natural stewardship. You're asking God to do for you what He's already told you how to do for yourself. James 2:26 says, "Faith without works is dead." You can pray all day for financial breakthrough, but if you're not tithing, not budgeting, drowning in debt, spending emotionally, hiding money problems, refusing to invest, working with mediocrity, and making decisions without counsel, your prayers are just noise. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 is even more direct. If anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. God doesn't reward laziness with miracles. He doesn't bless disobedience with abundance. You cannot pray away what behavior brought in. Here's what breaks my heart. People are waiting for God to do what He's already told them how to do. They're waiting for a financial miracle while the principles that create miracles are sitting right in front of them in Scripture. You don't need a lottery win. You need to stop robbing God. You don't need a bigger salary. You need a budget. You don't need an inheritance. You need to stop spending money trying to impress people who aren't even thinking about you. The miracle you're praying for is locked inside the obedience you're avoiding. The wealthy believers aren't lucky. They're obedient. They didn't get a special miracle you didn't get. They applied principles you're ignoring. Malachi 3:10 says, "Test me in this." God is literally inviting you to try His financial system and see if it doesn't work. But you can't test what you won't practice. You can't experience biblical prosperity while practicing toxic financial habits. It's impossible. You're asking God to bless what He's already told you to change. So here's the truth. If your bank account is proof that these habits are real, you're not alone. Millions of believers are stuck in the same cycle. But here's what changes everything. God's financial principles still work. They worked 3,000 years ago and they work today. Malachi 3:11 promises that when you honor Him first, I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, so that he will not destroy the fruit of your ground. Your financial future can change the moment your financial habits change. Not next year. Not when you make more money. Right now. Today. But you must decide today, not someday. Stop praying for more money until you're willing to fix these money habits. Subscribe to Biblical Finances for more wisdom on building wealth God's way. Comment below and tell me which habit is costing you the most money. And here's your challenge. Take just one of these habits and change it this week. Budget for the first time. Tithe before you pay bills. Stop hiding that credit card from your spouse. Just one habit. Watch what happens. Because God is not withholding blessing from you. Your toxic financial habits are. And those can change starting right now. Please subscribe and turn on the notification button for more interesting videos.